Okay, so this video, or this section could be a little longer, so I'm going to split it up into two videos. Hopefully two. So topic 4.3, definition, measurement, and functions of money, module 23. Oddly enough, we're going to start with definition and functions. Measurement is towards the end. That'll be the next video. All right, so let's go back in time, close our eyes, and imagine the old days. I mean, like Paleolithic. We're talking really ancient times. So people would share with their local clan. Uh, Sometimes this is kind of an old term, but you'll hear this as a traditional economy. That's how they were referred to as. Um, Traditional economies are things like hunter-gatherer societies. People would go out, men would go out and hunt, women would gather, and they would share the food, tools, everything communally. All right. Marx called that the proto-communism, but most economists will just call it a traditional economy. If they needed something that they weren't producing themselves, they would trade with other clans and other groups. So like merchants and people like that, and they would barter with those people. Sometimes we think of bartering as being like the initial economic system. It actually only really took place between strangers, people where there was no trust-based relationship, no reciprocation. If you ever take a sociology class, you learn about the importance of reciprocal relations. Whatever, getting off topic. This is economics. So, in the early days, there was no real, money or anything like that. Bartering is how people would get things that they didn't have, and they would trade it with people they didn't know. If you and your family were farmers, but you needed ore, for making tools or whatever, or you just needed to buy tools, you'd have to trade with someone else because you spent your entire day doing farming work, and it took a lot of work, right? Ask Mao how it works out if you make farmers do industrial work at the same time, right? It doesn't, doesn't work out so well because farming is very labor intensive. Okay, but what if you need a new shovel, but no one wants your agricultural goods right now? What do you do? I mean, you go to other people. You go to the village over there where there's a guy who makes shovels, and you're like, hey, I got all this grain. Can I get a shovel? He's like, you know what? I actually have more grain than I need right now. I don't really need any more grain. And so what's going to happen is he may not want to give you a shovel at all, or he's not going to give you a good price. He doesn't have a demand for grain right now. And so you might have to give him a lot of grain just to get a shovel because he's like, hey, you know what? Grain's not that important to me. It's not that valuable. I have a large amount of it, a huge supply, and my demand's low for it right now. So you're in trouble, right? So if you're a farmer and you need that shovel, you might be in some trouble. Think about another scenario. What if your axe breaks, but harvest isn't for another 2 months, right? If you're a farmer and you grow your crops one year, you harvest in the fall, then you have those crops for the winter and the spring and the summer, and then you're hoping for another harvest in the fall again. Well, what if it's July and your tools break? What do? You're already running out of food. You're maybe just scraping by, getting by with what you had from your stores from last year, and now you're not going to get paid. Essentially, you're not going to get your crops for another 2 months. Well, what do you do? Right? So bartering, it has a lot of flaws. Bartering has a lot of flaws. Next thing is another question: how do you know how much grain to trade for a scythe? Right, and that kind of goes back to here too, where people might have different values on different goods, grain versus tools and things like that. How much grain is a scythe worth? How do you know if you're getting a good deal or getting taken advantage of? What if you went to the next town over and that guy didn't have a large amount of grain in his stockpiles? He would have given you a much better deal because grain would have had a higher value to him for that tool. You didn't know that, right? And so bartering has a lot of flaws, right? So if only there was something that we could do to solve all the problems with bartering. Money. And we've already talked about money before in this class. Simple definition for money. Money is what it does. Okay, that seems weird, but money is what it does. It's a financial asset. So it's an asset, something you can accumulate, obviously, too, that can purchase goods and services. By definition, it is super liquid. It's about as liquid as you can get. It really pretty much is. It's accepted and desired by everyone. All right, and you might be saying, well, what about gold and silver? We'll talk more about gold and silver in a little bit, but gold and silver is not even as liquid. And also, gold and silver runs into other problems where different societies value gold and silver differently, right? But money is money, and it has a dollar amount on it, and it's pretty much set, and we all accept and desire money, and we accept that it's worth a certain amount of money. we're going to go through some more examples here, and hopefully a little bit more, a little bit more sense, and we'll talk about more of the history of it. But money is a financial asset that is super liquid, and it can purchase goods and services. When we're talking about like being liquid and having liquidity, we're oftentimes talking about cash. Now, important thing here: money does not equal wealth. Sometimes we use these words interchangeably. I've probably used them before interchangeably. I'm sure you have as well too. And having a large amount of money might mean you are very wealthy, but it doesn't mean that necessarily. Remember Michael Jackson. Michael Jackson was very wealthy, but he had almost no money, right? He had a lot of wealth. He had almost no liquidity. So we use these terms interchangeably. It's not necessarily accurate. Money plus other assets is a better definition for what wealth is. So let's say you own a giant house and you own a giant boat and you own your own business and cars and all this other stuff, and you maybe have stocks and bonds and things, but you go to McDonald's and you can't buy a Big Mac. You're a wealthy person. You just have no liquidity. You have no money, right? You have no liquid assets at this time period. So, you can't go to McDonald's and be like, hey, how many Big Macs can I get for this boat? That's not how McDonald's works. They're not going to give you goods and services because they want liquid cash. They want something that's transactionable. So anyways, Michael Jackson, large amount, he had his own theme park, right? He had a large amount of other assets, almost no money. Therefore, he was wealthy but had no cash. He was almost bankrupt in terms of cash. This happens a lot to celebrities. Pay attention to your books. All right, function of money. So money has three roles in our society. One, it's the medium of exchange. It's used to trade for goods and services. It kind of takes the place of bartering, right? So that's the simplest use for money. It's medium exchange. I mean, that's about as simple as it can get. If you look at your dollary dues, it says right on there, legal tender for all public and private transactions. Basically, it's the medium of exchange. So it's what's used to trade for goods and services. You don't have to carry around bushels of apples anymore, or grain, or whatever, axes. It's also a store of value. So money holds purchasing power. And yes, I know inflation, blah, 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 blah. But anyways, it holds purchasing power for at least a period of time. So now if you have a store of value, if you have a store of money, you don't just have to do business when the harvest happens, right? So remember our farmer back there who struggled because his axe broke 2 months before the end of the season, the harvest season. Well, now he had this store of value. He had money because he turned his grain into money at the end of the year. He sold it for cash, medium of exchange, and now he has that money which he can use for whatever he wants throughout the next year. Assuming he has money still. So farmers don't just have to do business when the crops come in. They have a store of value now. Grains and things like that, they go bad. Money doesn't. It sits there as long as you take care of it. All right, and next it's a unit of account. And this is probably one of the more important ones, especially for you guys going to college next year. So money is also a common unit. So it's a common unit that allows for easy comparison of value. Imagine if you had to pick a college, if one college required 50 goats a year and the other was 40 cows. How would you choose? You would have to be like, well, I have more goats than cows right now. That's stupid. And how do you know the actual true cost? Like, what is a goat to a cow? Like, how many cows is a goat? How many goats is a cow? This is ridiculous, right? Money is a common unit. The United States of America uses US dollars, and so everything that we buy and sell is bought and sold in the same unit of account. They're all in US dollars, and that way you know that if a college is $10,000 a year and another is $15,000 a year, you know basically what their costs are. It's not goats and cows. So it's a common unit of account. You've used money your entire life and you probably never considered, but all of these things you probably have some idea of inherently. Like, this is the inherent function of money. And that's why we use money today. All right, so let's talk about the history of money here real quick. Money started out as commodity money. All right, so we went from bartering, exchanging valued goods essentially, and then we said, okay, let's. How about, an axe is worth a certain amount of gold or a certain amount of silver, right? And these are commodities. These are things that we say have value in their own right, although that is debated. But we say that these are things that have value in their own right. There's only so much gold. It's pretty. It's shiny. It doesn't really corrode. And so, it's soft and malleable. You can use it, make jewelry and things like that. And so we're going to stamp it into little coins. And we're going to say that these coins, which weighs a certain amount, is the same amount of size, is worth something. And as long as people agree that that amount of gold has some amount of value, then you can use it for basically all of these functions. Medium of exchange, you can use gold coins to trade for goods and services, or silver, or whatever. It's a store of value. Your gold coins sit there. They don't corrode. They don't really go away bad easily. And so they hold value for a long time, and they're a unit of account. So basically, everybody can then say, well, this is 20 gold coins, and that's what it is, you know, and everybody can then compare prices. Oh, that's 20 gold, this is 15 gold, so on and so forth. By the way, if you had 15 gold coins for most of history, you'd be incredibly wealthy. Video games have lied to you about the amount of gold and silver people would have. But anyways, so money started out as a commodity money. You know, gold, silver, things that we believed inherently had value in their own right. You would say gold and silver are shiny and rare, and I like them because I have a monkey brain, and that's, you know, how it works. It doesn't have to be gold and silver, though. We see this commodity money still does exist in some places. So if you ever end up in prison, cigarettes, you're like, well, I don't smoke. That, you know, cigarettes are important to me. Well, for a long time, cigarettes were used as a commodity currency in prisons. So people, you know, cigarettes have a value in their own right. And then if you use them to exchange for goods and services in prison, we're not going to get into what those goods and services might be, but they can exchange cigarettes for goods and services just the same as gold and silver, things that have a value in their own right. As a lot of prisons have banned smoking in recent years, prison economies, and yes, that's a real thing, prison economies have moved now to canned fish and ramen noodles and other goods that serve the exact same purpose, right? So they banned cigarettes. I'm sure cigarettes are probably like a luxury good and still exist in prisons, but ramen noodles or canned fish, and yeah, like canned salmon and stuff, can serve all of these purposes. All right. So obviously this is hard to lug around. If you want to buy a house and it's, you know, 1,000 gold coins, that's going to weigh a lot. It's gonna be tough to lug around. So eventually people started to create, and probably China, although there were some other societies that were playing around with it, Persian society as well too. But probably China was one of the first ones to come up with what they called flying money. But it's a commodity-backed currency, commodity-backed money. So commodity, things that have value in their own right, on our exchangeable gold and silver and things like that, cigarettes. Now, commodity-backed money is getting a little more abstract. We're going to take a step away from like physical hard things that we can touch and say, okay, how about I give you a piece of paper, basically an IOU, that says if I give you this piece of paper, you have access to a certain amount of gold or silver that I have in a bank somewhere. We're getting a little bit more abstract, but now it's almost like a check. Paper currency, originally commodity-backed paper currency, was a way of saying like this piece of paper you can exchange for gold or silver or maybe prison cigarettes, I don't know, but you can take this piece of paper and turn it into a commodity. All right, and that was acceptable by most people. People would say, okay, that's great. Then now I can carry around this lightweight pieces of paper. The pieces of paper could have different denominations on them. They were, if you ever look up, you can find what the original print of like Song Dynasty Flying Money, what it looked like. It was supposed to be hard to replicate and hard to, I'm sure it happened, but it was supposed to be hard to counterfeit. And then people would be able to take that paper and use it as transactions, right? And so that commodity-backed money, these IOUs, these basically checks, they served all the functions of money. They were a medium of exchange. You could store value, and they were also a unit of account because basically they're just tied back still to commodities. If you looked at original U.S. dollars, so if you went back to like early 20th century, 19th century U.S. dollars, they say on them that they are redeemable for gold. And the U.S. dollar was worth, I don't remember, it's like 72 grains or something. I don't remember off the top of my head. But the U.S. dollar, each U.S. dollar was worth a certain amount of grains of gold. We're talking a really small amount. All right. And that's, you know, that was common throughout, for about 1,000 years. That was typically how commodity-backed currencies worked around the world. And so you would be able to take your dollars and go to that bank or go to the government and get gold or silver or maybe prison cigarettes, I don't know, and turn that commodity-backed money into a commodity. All right, hopefully that makes sense. These systems work, all right? These systems totally work, but at the end of the day, there's only so much of the commodity, and that limits economic growth. If your currency is based on gold or silver or cigarettes or whatever, then that means you can only have as much economic activity, only as much economic GDP growth and only transactions as there is gold and silver and cigarettes, right? That's your limitation. And that means that some people probably aren't going to have money. Gold and silver are incredibly rare and incredibly expensive. And if every dollar is tied to gold or silver, then that means you can only have as many dollars as there is gold and silver. And gold and silver is mined at a pretty consistent rate each year. And so the economy would be inflating each year, but at a very slow rate, a very, very slow rate. And so only so much gold and silver was being added. That's a problem because that means that some people won't be able to use money so much as a medium of exchange. They might have to go back to bartering. And that's really what started to happen. Like farmers in the 19th century of America started to run into this problem. When we were still based entirely on the gold standard, farmers oftentimes had no money. And you probably learned this stuff in the 10th grade if you learned about the populist movement and their push for the silver standard, the Sherman Silver Act. In the 19th century, in America, we started to butt up against this, where basically people were not having money. They didn't have any dollars because our dollars were tied to gold. And if you're selling grains, it's not worth a lot of money. It wasn't worth a lot of gold, and so people didn't have dollars. It hurt. They were unable to do exchanges. So people said, well, let's switch to silver. Silver's more plentiful. Well, it still had the same problem. You're just putting off the inevitable. So all of these things, commodities are limited. We have a very limited money supply. All right. So that means that you can only do so many economic transactions. That means that there can only be so much economic growth, that the GDP can only grow so much. All right. Some people still to this day argue that we should go back to the gold standard. It's considered to be more stable. Whether or not that's true, I don't know. But if we were to do that, it would cripple our economy. Our economy would shrink. Values make believe, and we'll kind of talk about that here in a second. So fiat currency. So this is what we use today. Once you accept that piece of paper has value and is readily acceptable and serves all the functions of money, do you really need the commodity? This is a big mental leap. It's really only the last 100 years or so that we've actually made this mental leap. And hopefully, I mean, other societies have toyed with it over his time, but in America, it's really recent. Really, the Nixon administration's where it fully pulled the cord on the gold standard. But anyways, think about it. Gold and silver are accepted on the faith that they have value. Why not piece of paper issued by the government? If you have the same faith in the U.S. government and the U.S. economy, then can't that piece of paper have value as well too? If a trusted authority says that it does? And I know that seems so weird and that seems so abstract and it doesn't make any sense. But that's literally how our money works today. If you look at your dollar, modern day dollar, it does not say redeemable for gold because it is not. Our money is not tied to any commodity today. Our currency today is fiat. Fiat basically just means make it so, let it be done. It's Latin, and it basically just means this has value because I say it does. The U.S. government says that that dollars have value, and we all agree that they do, and therefore they have value. Today, our dollars are not tied to gold or silver. Today, our dollars are tied largely to the demand for dollars and the strength of the U.S. economy. And that seems weird. It seems strange. And yeah, in a weird way, dollars are kind of, or at least the value of dollars are kind of make-believe. And we all kind of accept that they have value, and so therefore they do. Sometimes fiat currency will be referred to as the Tinkerbell effect. The Tinkerbell effect is the idea that if you believe something to be true, then it is. Well, that's how money works. We all believe that dollars have value, therefore they have value. If all of us woke up tomorrow and said, hey, you know what? Dollars don't have any value, they're meaningless pieces of paper, then yeah, the entire economy would collapse and nobody would be doing transactions. But thankfully we all still believe that it does. Fiat currency may be based on nothing, just papers that the government, Federal Reserve and the U.S. government says have value, but they serve all purposes of money. They're a medium of exchange, right? We use our dollars to buy goods and services. They store value. You can have a stack of dollars in a briefcase or somewhere like a mobster, and that will hold on to that money for value for a point of time, and it's a unit of account. Right? Fiat currency is no different than gold or silver, and that you could say like this is how many dollars it is, and as long as we all agree what the value of the dollar is, then there's no problems. So fiat currency is what the world works with today, and it's sort of a weird mental leap. Think about this, though. Fiat currency does have some weaknesses. It is tied to America. Our fiat dollars and the U.S. dollars are tied to the American economy. If America got conquered, right, our dollars become worthless because they're not based on gold or silver or anything. They're not gold or silver. And so if America goes under, so do our dollars. I don't want to go any further than that right now. But that's the general idea. It is entirely tied to us and our belief in the U.S. government. And that's where we'll stop for this video. Next video, we'll talk about how much money actually exists, and we'll get into how money is created later on in this chapter.